All right, in this lesson, what we're going to be looking at is your infographic, basically how to design it, some of the things you can implement in it, as well as things to look for in creations. Okay, before we do that, we're going to be looking at analyzing a few of the previously handed in infographics and some things that went well and didn't go well. And then we will show you how to start creating your infographic, but I won't show you the complete process from start to finish. That would just be very time consuming, but you should get all the skills that are basically needed for it. So the first thing you need to do is be aware of the criteria. Okay, so please read this criteria, be aware of color palettes, be aware of having a limited number of colors, limited number of fonts, limited sizes, be aware of the different graphs. You can see here bolded, you must have a circle graph, a bar graph, and one other visual representation. Your circle graph has to be created in Excel, etc., etc., okay, and you can have some other pieces here. So when we look at some of the student samples, what you'll notice is they're all done quite well. There's this consistent color theme, which we've talked about previously. And you can see here that this student has a bar graph, they have a circle graph, and they have some other representation. They did kind of a visual representation of the different types of games here, okay? And there's a lot of nice things that go into this. They have a limited number of colors. You can see the main colors here, kind of the dark blue, the pinkish, and the yellow here that's brought into several other characters as well. You instantly know what it's about. You know it's about phones and apps. You know that it's about video games, etc. Same thing here. You know what it's about as soon as you look at it. And that's a power of infographics. As soon as you see them, you know what they're about, not just by the title, but you can see here kind of the mask, as well as several characters from movies, limited number of colors, circle graph, bar graph, another representation. Here we've got desserts all over the place and color schemes. So you can see that these all instantly strike you with what they're about, and you can see what they're about, you know what they're about, and just from a short view you can say, yeah, that looks really good to me. So that's the first thing. To get into more of the technical elements of what you're seeing, what you might notice, and just some other things you might want to notice, is that there's a limited number of fonts. You can install fonts or use fonts by default that are already in Photoshop. There's a lot of them there, but this student, for example, this font is the same one throughout, and she may have used a second font for the once a day, the more than 3 times a day, but it looks like there's essentially 2 fonts that are being used here, and you instantly know that it's about music. Okay, another thing that you might notice is that there's some consistency in sizes. In particular, one that I looked at earlier, I can show you in Photoshop. For those of you who are really picky people, I can look at this one right here. If we get into really picky specific things, if I look at the font here, this PUBG, for example, you can see when I click on it, the font size here is exactly 100, which the size doesn't matter. You can make it whatever size you want to, but you'll notice that the font size of other fonts that are in the same category, so Fortnite and PUBG, which are related in the same question, exactly 100 size font. Okay, and you think that the others probably is also exactly 100. So some consistency in font size in some of the dynamics. Even here, having these ones kind of go from small to big to small. It's kind of a bubbled font that you can see there. I can show you how to do that. Those are consistent throughout. And you can even get into the nitpicky stuff here. Even with the Netflix and the others, etc. If you look at the font size, this is exactly 50. This is exactly 50. If you look at the font size of the percents, they're probably all exactly 40. So this is a student who is really picky about the overall graphic design and look. So you can see that it just turns out and it pops with the eye a little bit more. Some of you may also remember things about alignment, so centering or left aligned or right aligned, which maybe we can show you in some of the samples here as well. So a lot of work and a lot of thought goes into these projects. I really like this one. You'll also notice that in circle graphs, there's all sorts of ways to reference. For example, in the one that I've kind of designed right here, my circle graph just has the category as well as the percent right on that, on each piece. Other students sometimes use legends. So you can see that this student right here used legends with the actual app icons that they are. One thing he did forget was to have the percents inside the circle graph. I expected that you have that, but he referenced them with colors. You can see in here, the Instagram color is exactly the same as the Instagram piece of pie right there. This student decided to do it with little backpacks. So you can see here that in Which Way to School Affect You, the yellow is both. So 20 people and 83.3% selected both. So you can look at lots of the samples and see a variety of ways that students have set up and designed their different infographics. Okay, so that's kind of where we started, and I'm going to kind of, when I talk you through this, I'm going to look at using maybe this color scheme that I've got off coolers.co. Okay, so here's one that I created previously when I had been introducing this assignment, and I just want to show you some of the things that I kind of thought about and did as I was doing it. So I went to Google Images and got a whole bunch of things. So you might notice, for example, there's a banner up here. I looked up banners, and I think I've got some banners here. But they weren't completely the right colors. So if you wanted to make them the right colors, there's all sorts of ways. You don't have to have banners, but there's all sorts of ways to do that. But again, if you want to deal with color schemes, make sure you've got a consistent color scheme that you want to deal with. So let's say I wanted this banner to kind of be the dark pink and the light pink color. So I'm going to take this hex code, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to go into Photoshop, and there's lots of ways to do this, but if you go to the colors over here, what you can do is dump, so the hex code right here, if I paste that in there and hit OK, it's that exact color. Then I can pull out the paint bucket tool and dump it into that part of the banner. Okay, sometimes Photoshop does a good job of identifying this similar color, and sometimes it does a poor job, which you might see on the next part that I'm going to show you, perhaps. So if I took, for instance, this lighter color and copied the hex code and then pasted it into the color scheme here, and use the paint bucket tool, you can see that it carried over to this region as well. So what you can do if you would like to is do a selection. I'm not sure how well this will go. It didn't go terribly well. But you can look at the selection tools here, and there's a variety of things you can do and edit if you'd like to. But I'm just going to subtract maybe this part of the selection. Again, this gets a little bit above and beyond what all of you will do, but I just want to show you things you can do so you have ideas. But now that I've got this selection, if I pull up my paint bucket tool, it should only select that little part. And I can do the same thing over here if I wanted to, because sometimes Photoshop has issues with selecting particular color schemes. Okay, but these are just ideas. I'll show you a little bit about fonts in just a little bit as well, so just hang in there if this part isn't really pertinent to you. I just wanted to show you how you could deal with color schemes and bringing those pieces in. So, and then finally these blue parts, if you wanted to choose a slightly in-between color, what you could do is go into the color scheme. I'm just going to drag this down a little bit and say, okay, well that's kind of maybe an in-between color that'll work. And then if I could, just dump that in there. So we've kind of got that as our banner. And then bringing that in is a little bit tricky as well. So what you could do is pull out your selection tool, and I'm just going to select just that banner. And I'm going to copy it, and I could go to my background here and dump it in there. So that could be my banner, or what I want to use for what my title is going to be. Okay, and if you want to change the background color for what you're working on, that's not hard to do. You can do the same thing with the paint bucket tool. So I'm thinking maybe if this is my color scheme here, these are all kind of lighter colors, maybe a dark gray. You could also use a really, really light background color if you'd like to, but don't choose white. I might go with and you could always change this if you'd like to. I'm going to go with, and be aware of the different layers that you're working in. So I'm going to go to the background layer and just dump a dark gray in there. So there we're kind of piecing it together, okay? We had looked previously at circle graphs. So if you've got a circle graph, for example, that you're working on, same thing. If you'd like to, you can dump colors into this circle graph and bring it in. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. And you can experiment with the bar graph and a few other things as well on your own, and bringing in some items, and I'll show you some fonts. But same thing here. It's a little bit better if you edit it in Excel, and I do have a lesson, a YouTube tutorial for that you can look at separately. You can see how to create bar graphs in Excel because of the gradient here. So it won't work quite as well if you're using the 3-dimensional circle graph. In fact, I might want to steer clear of it, but if you wanted to try it, you could. So you could just take whatever color it happens to be, and then same thing here is paste that color in. And dump it in there. Okay, but this is where you're kind of coming up against a few issues because of the gradients. It has a harder time identifying. So you're going to have to zoom into those areas and get pretty picky about those things. But I'm not going to get into that too much right now, just for the sake of the time of this lesson, okay? But you can see how you can be pixel accurate. So let's say theoretically I had my new color scheme in here and I could throw in the percents. I'd probably want to get rid of the background so I could bring it in as a PNG. So I could use my magic wand tool, for example, make sure I unlock the background layer. So these are all review things that some of you will remember and others won't. I could erase, see the little words down here. So I could erase all of those and then take my selection tool. Again, it's not completely done just for the sake of time here, but I could go into my project, copy it, paste it in. And again, this looks a little bit ghetto. It's not fantastic, but it is an okay start, right? And you can imagine how the different color scheme. All right, so regarding fonts, I just want to remind you of alignment, centering, all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to tell you how to select fonts, but when you're typing, so let's say that this green one here was people who liked hot dogs. So if I wanted to, I could type, and it's really small. I'll show you how to deal with that in just a second. So you can either change the size before or after. So if you want to change it after, what you need to do is highlight. I'm going to hit the check mark up here. You need to highlight the text if you want to change the size afterwards. You can either type in a new number here or scrub with your mouse, which means just grab that T and move it to the left or right. You can look up YouTube videos on it as well. If you ever want to move your text, you could use the move tool. And here we go. Okay. Again, it's not a good color. I'd probably make it this green color. A few other things you can do with fonts. So if you want to change the font, it's really easy to do. You could just, with your text tool, highlight the font and choose whatever new font that you want it to be. Okay. Some of you might be interested in what this student did with some outlining. Okay, so this student did outlines around her font and actually around some of her images as well, like the PUBG and Fortnite one. And how to make it kind of bubble up. So I'll show you all that stuff. It's once you know where to look, it's not as difficult as you'd imagine, and some of you might like it. Okay, as far as bubbling or rotating, that's all right here with this tool. So if we go into, you can do arcs, you can do arc upper and lower, you can do a bulge. So she had used a bulge. I'll just show you the arc, for example. So there's an arc. So if I wanted to, I could arc it however I wanted to, or I can make it match the curve of the outside. So let's pretend that I wanted to make that match the curve of the outside. I could bring that up here. I could even rotate it if I like to. Again, not always easy to do, but I could, if I was really picky, kind of make it match the rotation. But again, have some fun with it. As far as outlines go, so the outlines that were around her text, if you're interested in that, again, you don't have to do this at all. But as far as the outlines go around her text here, you just do that in the FX panel. And I've shown you that before, but if you want to, so if you go into that layer that says hot dogs, I'm going to go into the FX panel. And inside there are some options, lots of options. You can do shadows and all sorts of stuff as well, but the outline is just called a stroke. I'm going to do right now, it's set to be on an outside, there we go, on an outside stroke. I'm obviously going to make it smaller. You can make it whatever color you wanted to. Again, it's not a necessary piece, but if you wanted to, that's a way you could kind of make an outline around things as well, okay? Finally, in my gum sample here, another thing I did was to try and get these faces to not just be very basic. What you're going to see is in most of the infographics, the images are super basic. They're silhouettes or they're just icons. You rarely see like full color photos inside an infographic. You want things that are basic. Okay, and you'll see the same thing here. So just icons, etc. You can get those off of Google. One student who did a good job of having actual photos, but it was rare, was this student here. She had photos of a guitar fretboard, as well as a guitar, some records, and all that sort of stuff, but generally icons. So keep them simple, but I just wanted to play around with my color schemes to make those. So what I did is I found this right here, and it was a boy blowing bubble gum, but he had way too many colors. So basically, all I had to do is with my color scheme, do what I've shown you previously, which is just pull in these colors, right? So you might want this color to be his outline, so you could copy that. You could paste it into the color scheme. But basically what I'm showing you here is to play around a lot, to tweak it, and to know that in graphic design, things don't necessarily happen quickly, and nor should they. So there's kind of his that piece there, and maybe you don't want to have his eyes in there, which I'll show you how to edit that in a second here. But yeah, just playing around with the colors, and if you want to create icons out of items, you can do that just how I'm showing you right now. So bringing those pieces all together can make quite an impact, as you can see in this simple infographic as well, right? So I've got a bar graph, which again, you can create just in Photoshop if you'd like to. It doesn't have to be Excel. A circle graph has to be created in Excel, and then some other graph. Many people are doing pictographs with various sizes. So look at some samples, play around, have some fun with it, and realize that it won't go quickly, but you just want to be careful about being precise and laying it out and filling out the space really, really well.